What happens when the rule of law dissolves thousands of miles from civilization? How close to death must you be to forge an entirely new social order? In 1620, 102 desperate souls were trapped aboard a cramped vessel, battered by storms, and stranded on a harsh, freezing wilderness. On board, impending chaos threatened to destroy whatever meager hope remained. The strangers, the non-Puritan settlers, were already threatening mutiny, arguing that once outside the jurisdiction of their Virginia land patent, no laws applied to them. But amidst this hunger for survival and control, 41 men gathered. This was not merely an act of faith, it was an urgent act of legal desperation. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to uncover the true, dark motivations behind what would become the very foundation of American governance. As we examine the travelogues and historical records, we see the critical context. Out of the 102 passengers who embarked, nearly 50% would perish during the brutal first winter. This catastrophic pressure transformed the need for order from a luxury into a fatal requirement. It was the 41 most influential men to free, adult males who decided the only path to survival was voluntary submission to a common rule. They weren't just drafting a contract, they were signing a survival pact, knowing any deviation meant certain death for everyone. The data reveals that while 102 people were aboard, only 41 men, representing the propertied and influential class, were deemed worthy to sign the compact. This document, often lauded as the birth of American democracy, was fundamentally an emergency measure designed to manage extreme scarcity and prevent the collapse of their social hierarchy. We are digging into the original manuscripts and passenger lists to expose the simmering tension. Who truly held the power? Why the 41 men, and not the full 102? While the historical narrative celebrates this as the birth of a unified, democratic spirit, our investigation reveals it was an oligarchy of necessity, a strategic legal move designed to stop the common men and indentured servants from seizing total control. It was hunger, both physical hunger and the hunger for ultimate control, that forged the agreement. Tune in on November 21st to reveal the silenced names and the explosive class. Conflicts that shaped this foundational American mystery. The year is 1620. They sailed seeking religious liberty, only to land in a state of legal anarchy, 3,000 miles from any established authority. When the Mayflower reached the shores of Cape Cod, they were dangerously far north of their sanctioned destination in the Virginia Territory. This geographical error was not just an inconvenience. It was a legal catastrophe. The royal charter that granted them legitimacy to establish a colony was now, effectively, void. Without a recognized government or a standing code of law, chaos was immediately imminent. The strangers, those aboard who were not the devout Puritans, began to murmur about the idea of self-governance, or worse, simply scattering to loot and survive on their own. The ideal of a new, godly society was about to be swallowed by hunger and outright disorder. But the threat wasn't merely philosophical. It was an existential crisis, demanding immediate, practical action. We must look at the hard numbers that defined their crisis and the urgent necessity of a solution. Of the **** 102 total passengers, ***, who had endured the agonizing 66-day transatlantic crossing, the overwhelming majority were already weakened and exhausted, while only ***, to deaths, ***, occurred during the voyage itself. This deceptively low number masked the coming horror. Historical records and subsequent colonization data indicate that without immediate, unified action, the ***, estimated mortality rate for that first winter season was well over 50%. They were facing nothing less than mass extinction, staring down the brutal landscape of a New England winter with no authority but the law of the strongest. The human spirit, shattered by the voyage, was now confronted with the ultimate test of survival. Survival demanded an unprecedented political response. On November 21st, old-style calendar, in the cramped, freezing cabin of the Mayflower, 41 adult men gathered to salvage their mission. It wasn't a constitution, it was a covenant. They agreed to covenant and combine ourselves together into a civil body politic, what would become known as the Mayflower Compact. This was true order born of absolute chaos. 41 starving, cold men, establishing the rule of law purely on the principle of mutual consent. It was a radical democratic experiment driven by sheer necessity, ensuring that the ideal of a new society could survive the brutal, immediate reality of hunger. After 66 days of maritime brutality, the sight of land on November 21st, 1620, should have been a triumph. Instead, it was the genesis of a catastrophic legal crisis. They were not where they were supposed to be. Their patent, granted by the Virginia Company, was valid only for Virginia, yet the Mayflower was anchored far north. In Cape Cod, the law that bound them dissolved into the cold air. This demographic reality amplified the danger. The ship carried 102 souls, but the company was perilously divided, as we see in the data. There were the saints, the separatists, who accounted for roughly 41 individuals, and the strangers, merchants, servants, and adventurers who constituted the majority. This stranger faction immediately seized upon the legal vacuum, arguing that since they had landed outside the jurisdiction of their charter, they were free agents. The air filled with dangerous rhetoric. Men began to declare that when they came ashore, they would use their own liberty, for none had power to command them. This was not mere dissent. It was the chilling prelude to mutiny and collapse. Governor John Carver and the Pilgrim elders knew swift, decisive action was needed. If the colony fractured now, the coming winter would annihilate them. The response was revolutionary, the drafting of a temporary constitution, a covenant forged in desperation, the Mayflower Compact. Before a single person set foot on the hostile shores of Cape Cod, 41 adult male passengers, the leaders, the decision-makers, and the necessary converts from the stranger faction, as reflected in our project's 41 men, gathered to sign. This document was the ultimate stopgap, binding themselves into a civil body politic for the sake of survival. It was not about democracy as we know it, but about imposing immediate, necessary order. The hunger for survival had birthed the first self-governing document in the history of the New World, ensuring that those 41 men, and the 102 people they represented, would not be swallowed by the chaos of their unauthorized landing.
The air was thin, heavy with the specter of starvation. They weren't just signing ink on paper, they were wagering their very souls against the laws of nature. The ideal had found its voice, but would 41 broken bodies listen? Hunger was the brutal predator, but chaos was the death sentence. That crumpled parchment, the provisional compact, was the final recourse against total disintegration. The moment the agreement was put forth, the tension in the makeshift shelter was unbearable. The men knew they were trading primal freedom for collective survival. The choice was not between life and death, but between a messy, brief death and a structured chance at life. The Mayflower Compact, signed on that critical day, November 21st, 1620, was the immediate cure for the political anarchy threatening to dismantle the expedition before land was even secured. But it was only ink on paper. Hunger and cold do not read documents. The ideal that unified 41 men was about to be tested against the most brutal of realities, the Massachusetts winter. The ensuing months were a silent massacre. Order had been established, but the capacity for survival was severely depleted. To understand the depth of the sacrifice, we must look closely at the data from that first season. The original expedition totaled 102 passengers, alongside about 30 crew members. However, as our casualty data table reveals, the death toll from November 1620 to March 1621 was catastrophic. 51 colonists, nearly half the entire group, perished. And here is the chilling truth about leadership. The ideal came at a high cost for its creators. Of the 41 men who signed the compact to bring forth order, asterisk, 21 of them, over half would not live to see the arrival of spring. The document persisted, but its architects were gone. It was a foundational sacrifice. What emerges from this tragedy is the true resolution to our mystery. The Mayflower Compact is not famous because it guaranteed everyone a long life. It is foundational because it guaranteed structure. The order did not rely on the life of any single leader, but on the collective acceptance of an agreement. While half the population succumbed to scurvy and pneumonia, The weakened and traumatized survivors continued to operate under the rules they had established in the midst of chaos. They proved that, ultimately, the ideal law and self-governance held more enduring power than the hunger and death. It was a somber, yet definitive testament to the birth of a nation based on promises. And that is the true mystery solved.